Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're bringing you a first look at Tier VIII Premium American Battleship USS Constellation. Now, I know there's a non-zero number of you history American, warship design history nerds out there that are super excited to see Constellation finally making her way into the game. For those of you that don't fall into that category, I'm going to try and catch you up because I am not necessarily myself in this category, but I'm going to pass along what I believe to be the case, and then I'm sure somebody in the comments will come along and tell me that I'm wrong. Constellation is essentially where the Lexington-class battlecruisers were headed when they were laid down. Tier VIII American American carrier USS Lexington is in the game, of course, as a carrier. And if you run this hull, if you put this hull alongside the hull that Lexington has right here in the port, they look very similar, as they should. Lexington was laid down as basically a giant battle cruiser, but of course she was like the Japanese did in some of the 20s conversions with the Akagi and so on. They paused those constructions, they redesigned the ship, they redrew the plans, and then the ship was ultimately finished as an aircraft carrier. Had that not occurred, however, Constellation is meant to represent what the Lexington-class battlecruisers would have actually looked like had they been finished. So, let's have a look around. How does this ship stack up to a Tier VIII battle? Every other Tier VIII battle, certainly the Tier VIII American battleships. She's got some pretty stiff competition in this category, particularly with the likes of Massachusetts and Alabama. The South Dakotas are really good ships. What are we dealing with? All right, well, let's start off, as we always do, talking about survivability. 63,300 hit points. This is identical to Alabama. This is exactly the same health pool that Tier VIII Premium American Battleship Alabama has. It's a little less than Massachusetts, and I believe it's pretty comparable. Let me have a quick check over here to, I believe it's pretty comparable to North Carolina. It's pretty comparable, yeah. All the American battleships are in this 63 to 67,000 HP range. This is on the low end, but we're only talking about 4,000 HP, so you're not going to miss it, really. Okay, so yeah, she's got plenty of HP for battleship. 20% torpedo protection you see there, that's not very good, especially when you put her next to, again, the South Dakotas, which have 45 plus, Kansas at 40%. This is North Carolina level torpedo protection. This is 19-20%. The Germans have 22 across the board. The Russians have basically 21 or 22. So it's not abnormal for a Tier VIII battleship to have torpedo protection this bad. Just note that it's not good. Maneuverability and concealment. Now this is where you're going to start to see some really nice things. 33.2 knots top speed. This is not the fastest battleship in Tier VIII. That title is still held by a Champagne, closely followed by Flandre. Both French, of course, because, the Marine Nationale definitely values speed. But as American battleships go, this ship blows the other American battleships in this tier out of the water by almost 6 full knots. The South Dakotas and North Carolina all coming in at 27.5. So, I mean, she is not the fastest battleship in Tier VIII, but she is in the top 2 or 3 here, so noteworthy. Turning circle radius, 900 meters. This is not good. It's not quite worst in tier, but it's pretty bad. It's in like the bottom 3. So she moves very quickly, but she does not turn so much. 15.3 second rudder shift there, fairly average. A lot of battleships in that 15 and change second rudder shift in this tier. Nothing abnormal there. So bottom line is she gets where she's going very quickly, but she does not exactly turn on a dime. And I think you can chalk that up to her overall length. This ship is definitely longer than a South Dakota class battleship, for example. Right, the bow, looks like she inherited her bow lines from a Colorado one tier down. She certainly inherited the guns and the gun turrets from Colorado, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And she almost looks like she inherited some of this girth, right, her big fat beam here at the center, from the Tillman boats, right? Like Kansas looks like she's almost this wide. So yeah, good speed, but probably not amazing handling characteristics. Concealment 15.1 there on the surface. That's with her fancy camo on, her permanent camo she comes with. It's 15.6 without that. Again, that's not best in tier, but it's not bad. It's not bad. The British and Roma, of course, still clean this category up more or less. Monarch 14.1, Roma 14.9, Odin 15.3, but then Vladivostok 15.5, and Constellation 15.6. She basically has the same detection as North Carolina, who is 15.7. Now, what's really strange, and I think this is going to get changed in testing, she has the worst interior, almost worst interior. She basically has Kansas level aerial detection, which I don't understand, right? This is 13.0 aerial detection is way worse than most battleships in this tier. The fact Kansas's existence is the only thing that keeps this from being worst in tier. So I kind of question why this is a thing, like why they're doing this. I don't know. I forgot to talk about the armor layout when talking about survivability. So we're going to step back a bit and talk about the armor layout. This is really interesting. There's some neat things to talk about here and some stuff I want to point out. All right, so first of all, 27 millimeter bow means that, yes, you're not really going to, you cannot bounce 16-inch shells off your bow. However, this is like cruiser, like heavy cruiser level armor for the tier. It does mean that 15-inch shells cannot overmatch you. So those you can bounce. So which opponents you decide to pick on, bow on, will make a difference in terms of your armor scheme. She does have these big fat torpedo bulges, and I want to highlight this. 57 millimeter casemate is nothing really to get excited about, but 57 millimeters of deck armor, this is noteworthy. In fact, this is, as I've been looking through the Tier 8 battleships, I can't find another Tier 8 battleship with deck armor like this. There's a few 50s, there's a few 45s, there's a few 32s, but nobody else has deck armor this thick. In fact, this deck armor this good will shatter even Italian 8-inch SAP as it tries to plunge through her deck, or the casemate, right? Really interesting. So, example, if you're fighting this ship in an Amalfi, you may want to load the AP and try for his broadside, because your SAP will actually shatter on this, which is interesting. It also may come into play. It certainly comes into play when British level bombers will shatter on this all day. But I'm actually curious as to which of the HE bombs will might or might not shatter on this. I didn't do the research. I'd have to go run some numbers, but it's noteworthy. This is quite possibly best in tier deck armor here through the middle of the ship. All right, so enough about the exterior. Let's start peeling away layers, because there's some really interesting things to see. All right, so when you turn off the torpedo, you have to turn off the torpedo bulges to see her belt, right? You can't see her belt armor here. It's inside the torpedo bulges. And you see it here, 178 millimeters. So that is what? That is about 7 inches worth. It's not too shabby. I mean, when you consider her speed, it's obvious they sacrificed some armor to get her speed up to where she is. You have to think of Constellation, in my opinion, as like a battlecruiser, right? So for the tier she's in, you need to be comparing her to, say, something like Odin, kind of, who is down tier, smaller guns, but like battleship armor, kind of like a Scharnhorst does. Nobody else in this tier has, as strictly speaking, belt armor this thin. But we're not done yet. Let me show you something. Okay, I got to peel away more layers and rearrange some things. All right, so while we're here, let's talk about her citadel, by the way. That's her citadel. Very, very hard to reach in there. Quite low. I might even be fully submerged, right? Like, it looks like it might just barely kiss the waterline. Hard to say, but quite difficult to find in there, I think. But let's get back to the okay, so here's the casemate, that 178 millimeters. You see there, that's technically the belt armor. But watch what happens when I turn the torpedo bulges back on and then turn the casemate armor off. Look at this. Look at this. There's an extra armor belt in here, okay, that only shows up when you look at the torpedo bulges. Now, you can't see this armor from the outside, right? The bulge itself is 32 millimeters out here, but lurking behind it is this 6-inch belt. And let me see if I can show you this. It's actually below the 7-inch belt. So it's like tapered in here. I can't turn off just the exterior bulge, but if I could, you'd see it's 7-inch belt that tapers to a 6-inch belt. That 6-inch belt actually does drop below the waterline and kind of cover the top of the citadel. You can if I zoom right in here, look in this little gap right here, you can see there's a space in here, right? So here's the top of the citadel. There's an air gap in here below the casemate. There's the 6-inch belt. There's a lot going on with Constellation's armor scheme, and I'm left with the sense that she's going to be challenging to Citadel at long range. When you get the ship into close range, you get her broadside, battleship guns will probably punch right through this thing, presuming you can get them to depress far enough. Because remember, her Citadel is quite low, but she will take full pins, and I think Citadeling her at range, dropping shells through all of these various layers of armor, is going to be a challenge. So she's got some very interesting things going on with her protection. All right, main battery. Why are we here? We're here to talk about guns. We're here to talk about guns. If you've seen these guns, if you've played Tier 7 American battleship USS Colorado, these guns should be very, very familiar. Okay, these are 16-inch 45 caliber guns. You see here in the double turrets. These turrets are basically the exact same ones that are on Colorado. This is the same shell velocities, the same shells, the same shell damage, etc., etc., etc. The range is shorter. You see their Constellation's main battery is capped at 17.4 kilometers of range. That is less than Colorado starts with. And it is less than almost all the other American battleships in this tier. So you're dealing with something here that has kind of, full stealth rig. I think she can get down to about 13 and change. Let me check it. It is 12.3 on the surface, and she only has a 17.5 kilometer range. That's kind of interesting. She's going to be a bit of a challenge to play, but I feel, look at her armor scheme and everything. I feel like the sweet spot is going to be in that 15 kilometer range kind of thing. But can you hit anything? Well, now here's where it starts to get a little more interesting. Maximum dispersion, 194 meters. That is the best dispersion ellipse of any Tier 8 battleship. Now, that might be an acknowledgement of the fact that the ship only has 8 barrels, okay? Most Tier 8 battleships, of course, come to the dance with at least 9. Champagne's 6 being kind of the outlier and on the low end here. Most of them come with 8 to 9 barrels and then go on up. Of course, the Germans bring 8. Odin brings 9. North Carolina 9. Kansas 12. Amagi 10 and so on. But 8 is kind of on the low end. And I think this dispersion is kind of a nod to both the number of barrels you're dealing with and a little bit of that battlecruiser, perhaps battlecruiser style accuracy. Now, I will point out, you can't see this in port, but I did go check Game Models 3D. Her Sigma is only 1.7, so that's not amazing. You're throwing 8 shells into this ellipse with a 1.7 Sigma. I'll be curious to see how our gunnery works out. I feel like maybe this Sigma could use a small boost, but I think this ship is going to be pretty survivable just based on, as I look around here, the complete package. I'll be curious to see how the main battery performance is. But if you fired Colorado's guns, you know what you're getting with the main battery here on Constellation. Secondary armament, nothing to really get excited about here. She does have 5 of the 5-inch, the ubiquitous 5-inch 38 the twin-barreled turrets here. She's got 5 running down each. She's got 10 total, 5 running down each side of the ship. And those form her secondary battery out to a range of 6.6 kilometers. So, yeah, not too shabby. Not amazing, not terrible. Those really help in the AA suite instead. Speaking of, let's talk about the AA suite. The AA suite on the ship is actually quite good, as befits an American battleship. You see there 8 flak explosions at 1540 damage a pop. That is just like Massachusetts, Alabama, so on and so forth. Continuous damage, again, the outer ring, 172 DPS, just like Massachusetts, Alabama. She gets most of her punch out of those 40mm Bofors. She does get a little less than the Sodax. She doesn't mount quite as many of the Bofors, but she does make up for that a little bit in the short-range aura. She mounts more 20mm guns than most of those other ships, so her short-range aura is beefier than that. So, yeah, I mean, she's going to have solid AA, right? She doesn't have defensive fire, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but she does have pretty solid AA. Now, offensively, while we're on this screen, let's talk about one more thing, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. Constellation has torpedoes. Welcome to Tier 8 USS Constellation. So back here on the stern, you have 2 triple-barreled torpedo launchers a la Graf Spee. When I first saw this, When I first saw this arrangement, I thought, okay, she's got these, they're just kind of hanging out here in the weather, just like Graf Spee's launchers. Pair triple launchers, these are Benson torpedoes, 9.2 kilometer range, 55 knot speed, kind of crappy speed, let's be honest. But one of the things that I like about it is that they make her a really, like, these torpedoes, her speed, these guns, I get the impression this is going to be a really, really good ship when she's able to kite an enemy, when they're pushing into her. She's able to throw torpedoes in her face. She's probably faster than whatever's chasing her down. Lots to like here in that sense. And I'll put up the graphic that shows the torpedo firing angles on this. It really, really is Graf Spee. She actually has better firing angles on these fish than Graf Spee does. But it's close enough that if you've driven a Graf Spee, you know more or less what you're getting here with these torpedo firing angles. Let's go look at consumables real quick because there's at least one more interesting thing I want to note here. She does get, of course, damage control party, typical heal for a battleship, and a choice between fighter and spotting aircraft. Pro tip, I recommend spotting aircraft, especially with her kind of questionable range. But more interestingly, she gets radar. This is going to piss a lot of people off, I'm sure. So now we have a second American battleship equipped with radar, a premium American battleship after USS Missouri, with radar now down here at Tier 8. Really, really interesting. This is Baltimore radar. You see there, 10 kilometer, 30-second, standard American Tier 8 radar, and so on. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things going on with Constellation. Her consumables loadout, her armor scheme, the guns. I mean, you're here for the main battery, so I'm really curious to see how the main battery performs. But I feel like this has the potential to be really, really solid. Certainly a unique challenge and a different play style for a Tier 8 American battleship, which is mostly about, other than Kansas perhaps, bow in, spammy, the secondary monster that is Massachusetts, or just the guns that come with North Carolina or Alabama. This ship offers something different, and I do like that because it's not just yet another, we vomited out another premium. There's a lot to like about Constellation because she actually is unique. She offers things that the other Tier 8 American premiums don't offer. And that's noteworthy. Anyway, guys, there's our quick first look at Tier 8 Premium American Battleship USS Constellation. Hope you enjoyed that. Wash your hands, be safe, and I'll catch you next time.